Final panel by the Transmedia Research Group, www.transmediaresearchgroup.com. Chair, Mary Carroll. Participants, Aline Remal, Diana Sanchez, Jorge Dias Cintas, Josélia Neves, and Pilar Orero.
My name is Pilar Orero. I work at Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. I am well built, over 60. I have short grey hair, and I am in a room with two pictures at the back and a bookshelf on my left.
I'm Diana Sanchez. I have short dark hair. I'm wearing headphones and a black jumper.
I'm Aline Remal. I've got short, brown, blonde, grey hair. My headphone is falling off. I'm wearing glasses and I have bright red lipstick.
Hi, my name is Jorge Dias Cintas. I'm wearing my headphones. Today I'm just wearing as well a jumper, which is blue, and then I've got a pair of spectacles on me.
And I'm Josélia Neves. I have very short grey hair, round glasses, and I'm wearing blue.
And my name is Mary Carroll, and I have medium blonde, medium long hair, and a yellow pullover and round glasses. And I have a bookcase in the background. Roundtable, the final session of this 9th Media for All conference, sketching tomorrow's mediascape. Our panel today is made up of Transmedia Research Group members Jorge Dias Cintas, Josélia Neves, Pilar Orero, Aline Remal, and Diana Sanchez. My name is Mary Carroll. At this point, we would like to express our deep and sincere thanks to fellow Transmedia member Anna Matamala and her team, who have held the reins and brought together everything to stage this highly successful and challenging venture of the first completely online Media for All conference. This Media for All conference, Sketching Tomorrow's Landscape, or Sketching Tomorrow's Mediascape, was initially designed to take place in real time at Universitat Autònoma in Barcelona. It was planned prior to any thoughts about the corona pandemic and how COVID-19 was to cast its shadow and impact across-the-board accessibility to audiovisual media. So in this brief panel, our panelists will raise and exchange views on some of the current developments in audiovisual media accessibility, examining trends from various perspectives. For example, that of the user who is not tech-savvy, and what is happening when it comes to emergency services, museums, theatre, opera, and other live events. Or when it comes to online and pay services as a result of new legislation in these areas. Or when it comes to the challenges of translating directly from and into English, and among other languages excluding English, and the role of pivot templates and/or multi-sensory translation. Panelists, what have you got to say about any of these issues?
Well, that's, if I may, that's a whole lot, Mary. And I think the pandemic has given us a lot of extra work, which is a challenge, which in some ways is also good. And I think one of the challenges that you mentioned is that a lot of content that didn't used to be online is now also online, which means there will be need for more accessibility, more audiovisual translation, also to be provided by people who are not used to providing it, and to be used by people who are not used to using it, because they have to watch live events in a different format now. So I don't know what you all think of that, but I think that's a major issue today and for the future.
I would agree on that. I think there has been, from my conversations with colleagues in the industry, it is clear there has been a boom in new ways of making audiovisual productions accessible to more people. We spend more time as well watching televisions and watching video on demand platforms and so on. So everybody's been talking about the platformitization of communication and how the platforms are leading towards the future and the way we're doing things. And I think that raises quite a few issues from other perspectives as well, not just only the access to gain into these new platforms, but also if this is the sort of look of the future, how are we going to be training people for the future? I think most of us still are training people in the old ways of doing things. And then we'll probably have to be thinking about, changing our perspectives, our ways of training new people and dealing with the new challenges that have come up to be because of the COVID. But I'm sure we will be discussing things like that a bit more in detail later on.
I mean, this is a good example, isn't it? Sorry, Giselia, but
Diana, go ahead.
this sort of event, what we've seen where I work is a real uptick in the amount of online events that we're being asked to caption live. Now, a lot of the platforms have got automatic ASR solutions in them, but really the need for accurate captioning, able to cope with multiple different accents, like, for example, what the people talking on this conference, we're seeing that there is an increasing need for that as people are doing more and more of their day-to-day job and more of their events and networking online.
It's interesting, Diana, that you are mentioning the different accents and different languages and how everything is expanding with this brave new world of the new technology. Something fantastic that I think came about with the pandemic and with all these new platforms and with all this, the need for live communication and information, is seeing that accessibility became forefront in all countries, especially with the presence of sign language interpreters in the dissemination of any information related to the coronavirus situation. So bringing in as a natural language, another language, the sign languages in the world, I think also deserves some thought and will definitely have an impact in the future in accessibility services.
Keeping this in mind, would you say it was the same in all countries that sign language took on such prevalence, or was this quite different from country to country?
I'm sure that there will be differences from country to country, but never before have I seen so many countries taking to it. Allow me to share what happened in the Arab world, and in particular in Qatar, where I was at the time. We had never seen a sign language interpreter as we are now seeing on absolutely every piece of news. So it was a boost, even in those countries where we had nothing before, or let's say we had very little before. Now, is it the same in every country? I'm sure not. But there was definitely an increase in most countries.
Pilar, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, this is a fantastic example because, for example, if you look at the UK, you have the BBC, who are not taking, the government who is not taking care of the sign language, is the BBC who puts the signer there. And you have in Scotland that it is the government who takes the burden, picks up the burden of the cost of the sign language. So you have the sign language interpreter all the time next to the person giving the interview or the news or whatever. So it is quite interesting that within the same country, you have completely different political approaches towards sign language and accessibility.
Aline?
Yes, and even maybe more surprising, or maybe not, in Belgium, the trend has always been, if you want to live here, you learn Dutch. And then suddenly there was COVID and everybody got sick. And the government started realizing, okay, it's not working. We have to speak different languages. So thanks to COVID, not just sign language, but translation came to the fore. Whereas before they had been trying to abolish, for instance, sign language interpreting, but also interpreting in hospitals. Subtitling was limited for deaf and hard of hearing. And now suddenly, oh, panic, we need languages and we need translation. So that has been a great boost for translation as well, generally, even, and audiovisual. Yeah.
So
And
would it be accurate to say that accessibility has received an impetus and will continue in this direction going forward?
I think it already had, to a certain extent. There was legislation tabled in several countries that was going to impact online services, for example, pay TV and VOD. And those, the consultations have gone ahead. And I think we are already seeing a lot more access services, even though there is no legislation. In the global platforms, for example, it's no way standardized in terms of quality or aspect, but I think that we're already seeing more and more access services, and as legislation is passed in different countries, I imagine that that's gonna increase.
If I can chip in there, I'd like to be as optimistic as Diana, and I think we need to make a distinction between what it is the news, what it is a crisis situation, and what it is entertainment. And I think the increase hasn't been paralleled on those two fronts. I think crisis situations call for crisis responses, and that's why accessibility has been much more prominent, as we said, with sign language interpreters available on the screen, but also at the same time producing subtitles. So if you want, it was a double whammy of accessibility, which rarely occurs in other situations. But I don't think entertainment has experienced a much wider or bigger hike as it was before. And in fact, there was recently a conference in Buenos Aires, and one of the speakers there presented an overview of video on demand in Spanish platforms, and some of them don't produce any accessibility whatsoever. And even the best pupils in their school, as Netflix, their percentages will still be very, very low as compared to what television are doing and so on. So I think there is still a lot to be done in there. And I know we're going to be talking about automation later on. And I think that's probably one of the areas that many of these companies are looking at to see whether they can catch up or increase their levels of accessibility. But I think we need to be careful on how we perceive this increase. And in my opinion, is by no means standard or homogeneous. It's just a peak in certain areas, but we still need to continue.
I think, go on.
Yeah, sorry, it's a brief one. I think, yeah, you're right, of course. And I think we have to be careful and we have to be activists. I think researchers these days have to be activists. Maybe they've always had to be activists, and to make sure to take this forward into research and into practice so that we don't lose the impetus and so that it is spread to other areas as well.
Yeah.
No, it's just obviously I'm always pretty optimistic about this, and I do think that eventually captions will just be standard, that no one will create audiovisual content without captions because they're so valuable. Obviously, I've been saying this for donkey's years, and it's still not happened. But I do see more and more captions. They're now a basic part of TikTok, for example. You might not like the format, or as a purist, but I think they're more and more part of the experience that people expect when they when they're looking at audiovisual content. And yes, legislation will make that more standard, I guess, across lots of different languages. But I'm always optimistic. I think there'll be captions will just become standard.
I'd like to say that I'm also optimistic. I didn't mean that as being pessimistic. I do think that there is a lot of scope, and I think accessibility is here to bloom and to blossom. And we've seen it over the years, and it's increasing, and it is discussed very frequently as well, and people are taking notice of this. So the positivity is there, but I think still a long way to go.
Yeah.
And what about when we come to multilingual accessibility and accessibility across borders and across languages? What do we see as the trends in that area?
I think what Diana said is basic. I think accessibility is going to be pulled definitely by legislation. Legislation is going to happen in the next 3 years because it is the way legislation is working. It was approved last year, the European Accessibility Act, the Audiovisual Media Accessibility Directive, and the Web Accessibility Directive. And they have 3 years for that to be rolled across Europe. And when that happens, and there is a regulator in each country that has the responsibility to inform the European board that they control all this and the legislation, I think the accessibility will definitely will be there and will be there to stay as health and safety. Health and safety many years ago was a joke. Health and safety is no longer a joke. And it wasn't because companies were earning any more money by having health and safety standards implemented. It was because there was a law that unless you do have a health and safety, you can't open the shop. And if you open, they may shut your shop. So I think in exactly the same way accessibility is going to happen, is going to be pulled by legislation, not by warm people feeling great about each other and inclusive or it is going to be a fine closing down your shop, and this is going to be the way that accessibility goes. And we have 3 years, so in 3 years we'll see the difference.
Yeah.
And are we going to be seeing this legislation and these changes in single national languages or across borders?
No. Each country, they have to now. They have. If you go into the European Commission, I can only talk about Europe. If you go into the European Commission webpage, you would see that the European Commission has already raised the issue of only 3 European countries fulfilling the transposition of the European Accessibility Act into their countries. The next stage is that it will be a fine put in all the countries because they are not fulfilling their standards. But they have to do the extra. You can't just not do a law. You have to do it.
I'm only aware of what's going on in the UK and Spain, obviously. But in the UK, Ofcom's already published the consultation. That's last year, and they're expecting to implement over this year. And in Spain, we've had the Anteproyecto de Ley Audiovisual, which will that will impact on VOD services, pay TV, but it also increases accessibility on normal linear TV as well, specifically signing an AD.
But the interesting thing is that is both. It's on linear and non-linear.
Yeah,
and that's the beauty of the new legislation, that it applies to both private and public again, and in all European countries, which the UK is no longer one of them, which is interesting. But anyway, I presume they can do whatever they want now.
You had to remind us, didn't you?
Well, I don't know. It is interesting because what's going to happen to the UK regarding accessibility, I don't know.
It will also be interesting.
Go ahead.
No, it'll be interesting to see as well how the big players, because remember that we've been talking a lot about platforms and video on demand. There isn't a single European one worth mentioning. And the one that is probably going to be worth mentioning is not going to be European anymore because it's BrickBox and they want to go global, but everybody else is just from somewhere else. And I'm not sure how the legislation is going to be affecting these people that they're going to be producing, subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing in all the languages that they are doing. We know that they're not doing it right now. And from the conversations, the gatherings that I've been attending, I don't think there is an urge to be doing that anytime soon, and certainly not within 3 years, but I'm not really sure. how they will be impinged on that.
But they have to.
Yeah, I know, and I agree. I think legislation is important, and it always has been, also with traditional subtitling and captioning in the past. It's really essential. But I think we as researchers and practitioners have to watch how the legislation is implemented, because legislation is one thing and implementation is another. Trust me, I'm Belgian. They find ways around it. And they divert funds to other things and then repeat the same show so that they have 100% subtitling and what have you. Sorry, Belgians out there, but I'm speaking from experience. So we really have to monitor how legislation is implemented and whose advice is taken on board. Because I was very happy to see on the program of the conference there has been a panel on users and the end users' impact on how accessibility is actually done. And I think that is very important. And I don't know how important users are in implementing legislation right now, everywhere in Europe or elsewhere.
I mean, I can only speak for Spain, but we're currently in a working group that's looking to sort out how we're going to monitor quality of access services. And within that group, the end users of the services are the ones who are assessing the proposed metrics to say, okay, does this really give an idea of what quality is for me as a user of those services? So that's ongoing at the moment, and hopefully will be published in the new year.
Yeah, but perhaps Spain is not the best country to talk about users, given the weight of the associations. Perhaps Spain is the least representative country in the world for users. So, I don't know.
But we have to see also, I think, that audiovisual translation is a global phenomenon. And perhaps we could change our direction now and look at what role automation is playing in expanding accessibility multilingually and globally. And what role is that going to be playing in the future, if any?
You ask these difficult questions, Mary. I had another, if you look at the conference that has taken place in the meantime, when people are listening to us, I saw that there was a big focus on technology on the one hand and a big focus on creativity on the other hand. And I think it would be an interesting challenge to combine the two, because a lot of the new forms of subtitling, like creative subtitling, inserted whatever, and new forms of audio description that become integrated into a program, they require more creativity than translation has allowed in the past, but they also require technology. So I'd be interested in seeing technology and creativity come together more than they have been in the past.
Yes,
to tackle these issues.
Yeah.
Are we going to see more automation, and are we going to see hybrid workflows in the future?
I don't think automation is the word. I think personalization is the word. Because automation, you can always choose it because it will be there. So you will be able to choose either if you want the automated ones, or if you want the quality ones, or if you want the audio description with funny voices, which voice do you want for your audio description? You would be able to choose anything you want, where you want the sign language here or there, where you want the sound in the background or in the foreground. So I think automation is something, I'm sorry to say, the past.
Do you all agree? What about when it comes to hybrid workflows?
I mean, I can't say automation is the past, really. I think we're in the middle of it. I think the combination of technology and human skills right now is where it's at. I think, I mean, we, for example, have been implementing automation for years into the workflows. And I think the key is really that combination of the skills, for example, in live, the skills of an experienced live captioner in creating house styles or in specific word lists, combined with the generic engines that have come on leaps and bounds in the last years, you know, can actually give a pretty decent accuracy. Now, if we want to be getting subtitles and captions on more and more content, because there's more and more audiovisual content out there and we're communicating by video more and more, then I think that, you know, that is the future. It's the bridge, the hybrid workflows now that will become completely automated at some point. I mean, I'm really interested in what's going on with MT. I'm not currently in the translation part, more in accessibility, but I'd be interested in hearing from those who are sort of within what the translation side, how those that technology is being implemented to help translators, and how that's all going. I don't know whether Jorge, you or any of the others on the call have got something to say about that.
I think it is a good point, you know, on this idea of the automation from different angles. And I know automation has been here for a long time now and working in different perspectives, whether it is immersive sounds or immersive experiences, whether there was 3D and so on. But funnily enough, very little has been really channeled to the actual translation. When it comes to going from one language into another, very few resources has been made available to subtitlers as such. And remember, it was only a year and a half, 2 years now, that SDL came up with an API to work with subtitling. MemoQ had already done it a little bit earlier. I know of several platforms that are now testing neural machine translations and subtitling. And Netflix would only tell you timidly that they're moving in that direction. They don't call it automated translation, they call it assisted translation. And we know that some of the people have been working in that area. But I still believe there is a lot to go. We don't have much research being done there. As far as I know, and as I mentioned earlier on, this idea that we are training, as an academic, I'm training the professionals of the future. I don't think any university is teaching post-editing of subtitles, for instance. I don't think anybody's looking at how to teach. You know, we know that pivot languages are used in the translation. A film in Farsi translated into Finnish through English. I don't know if anybody doing or training students, training new professionals on how to deal with that, what sort of issues to be looking at and so on. So I think though technology has improved vastly, when it comes to the actual translation in itself, we're still looking for developments there, for new things to happen. And when we talk all this about, you know, the platforms and being in the cloud and so on, I think the cloud has been fantastic for workflows and on how you arrange your materials that you need to be doing there, and you can go from end to end, from onboarding to invoicing your clients. But when I look at platforms from the perspective of the translators, I don't see much change. I don't see any difference to some desktop publishing, desktop subtitling software. And I know the potential is there in the platforms, but they're not somehow being exploited for translators for the language. And I think that is one of the pending issues in our field. That, you know, the platforms need to be also be developed in a way that translation is taken into consideration on translators, and it's not everything geared to the project manager that is now the big brother, can see everything happening there. But if you're a translator, you still continue to work on most occasions on your own, not connecting with other translators working in the same programs, and so on and so forth.
That's fascinating, actually, because, you know, the key to implementing automation technologies successfully, I think, is that you need to make sure that the benefits of doing that are shared with, you know, the people who are using it. So if you're implementing ASR or MT, then you need to work with the subtitlers to make sure that those improvements are positive for everyone. You really need that sort of feedback loop, don't you? But if those subtitlers are freelancers and you're not in that feedback loop with them all the time, then I can see that might be why the technologies have not fully been implemented into subtitling software because they're stakeholders, but they're not stakeholders with a voice in that loop, right?
Yeah, I remember it was a few years back at the Berlin conference, and it was, when I mean a few years back, it's literally 2, probably 4, whenever that was. And the clouds were here, and then what they were asking, it was a large corporation, I won't tell you which one, but what they were asking subtitlers, what would you like to have? The main thing they requested 4 years ago was a spell checker in the cloud. So
they
that
hadn't
was,
been integrated.
it hasn't been integrated at that stage. So it gives you an idea on how the potential is there, but when it comes to fully integrating it and fully allowing everybody to enjoy, then sometimes it'll be slow on that
So
front.
this is perhaps a good note for us to move on to our final point, which is the future. Will there be more such collaboration in the future? And I'd like each of you to make one issue as the issue that you would see is going to play a very important role in tomorrow's audiovisual mediascape. Could we start with Diana?
Oh, just one. Oh,
Just
Lord.
one.
Okay,
in
just
one sentence.
I'm going to go with quality, I think, measurement of quality. So in an increasingly regulated and global marketplace, we need standard, practical solutions for objective quality measurement. And I say practical because these need to be able to be implemented, in the industry. So I think that for me, standard quality measurement is going to be something that's going to be key going forward.
And Giselia?
Interestingly, I'm looking at a future where audiovisual translation is no longer about audiovisual translation. It's no longer about technology, and it's no longer about online. What about the on-site? What about what will the future be for intersensory translation, precisely? Translating for touch, translating for smell, for the other senses. I feel that in the very near future, we need to think about or go beyond the audiovisual translation and not focus only on the sense of sight and hearing. We haven't done enough of it. We need to do more.
Okay.
I think I will not copy Diana, but I think I will go in that direction as well. I think there needs to be some sort of metric standard that you could apply. And if you are going to have legislation and possibly being able to fine and penalize some of the stakeholders, then you need to have reasons why you're going to do that. And quantifying that is going to be very, very difficult. And along that, I would also say, and this is something that has been discussed quite regularly now, that there are not enough professionals in this field. And quite a few companies complain that the lack of people that are fully qualified in this field. And that is an area that I don't think we've exploited as in many other areas in translation, the professionalization of subtitling or audiovisual translation. You've got quite a few bodies that will give certifications and confirm somehow the skills of the professionals involved. And as far as I know, there's nothing in audiovisual translation. We haven't really managed to develop that angle. So I think that is an area as well that I will be quite keen to see developed and discussed in more detail.
Pilar. Thank you, Jorge. Pilar.
I think I would like to go on the Joselia way in the sense that I think in audiovisual translation up to now, we were very clinical in the way we describe who is our audience. It was either the deaf or the hard of hearing, deaf and hard of hearing, the blind. And I think that approach, the clinical approach, I think is not a good idea. And I think we should be more embracing and more diverse. And we should not classify people by their disability, but by their capabilities. So we should be able to then, technology will come to the aid. And as I said before, personalize. So you would be able to personalize media in the way that you want. Do you have a smell or tactile, or do you want whatever you want added? So you would be able to have to be blind, deaf, not being able to read Japanese, and not be able to do sign language, you know, and all this multimodality. I think that's the way forward.
Thank you. And Eileen?
Yes, I'd like to go the same way, but more generally, I'd like to work with a very broad concept of accessibility, whereby accessibility is integrated into production rather than something that is added later. Takes into account end users that are very diverse. And I would like to end with the title of the conference, maybe, Media for All. I think media are diversifying, all is diversifying. So how do we bring the two together? And as a researcher, I'm very interested in seeing connections, because I think audiovisual translation accessibility is like a web. And if something changes somewhere, it reverberates somewhere else. So everything is connected. Technology changes, what the end user gets changes. The end user changes, the production has to change. So how does this web work? How does one relate to another? I think as a researcher would interest me. Certainly if I was younger.
Well, thank you very, very much to all of the panelists and to the conference organisers and every participant who has been involved watching the conference as it's proceeded and watching this final panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for organizing it as well.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you, Anna,
Thank
again.
you. Bye-bye to all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.